Thank you to all my channel members, including my fan appreciation level members and my contributor level members, for helping support the YouTube channel. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Star Wars: Reign of the Empire, The Mask of Fear. Yes, is the brand new release that just came out last week, and this is by Alexander Freed. This is a book that is the start of the trilogy. The trilogy is the Reign of the Empire trilogy. The title of this specific book is The Mask of Fear. And this book trilogy focuses on three main characters. It focuses on Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera. And this book in particular, I would say, is mostly Mon Mothma's book, and I would guess that the next two books are going to feature more prominently the others, although they're all three very prominently in this book. So this is very much a political book, and I don't mean political in the sense that it's trying to drive a particular narrative. Rather, it is a book that deals with Star Wars politics and has a lot of themes that can resonate today. And there's a lot of fans who say, keep politics out of Star Wars, and I get what you're saying. And I would argue that while this book is focused on politics and has themes that work today, it's not a book that feels like it is trying to push a particular agenda too much. It is obvious Alexander Freed's worldview. It is very obvious with certain things, characters he includes, the way he writes, things like that. But he still is able to write a generally fun book. So breaking this book down, it is, again, about three main characters. However, Saw Gerrera is not really a POV character except for just a handful of times, but Saw Gerrera is present throughout the book because he is around another POV character. So it's really Mon Mothma gets a bunch of POVs, Bail Organa gets a bunch of POVs, and then a new character named Sujin gets a lot of POVs. And Sujin is a ex-separatist who goes to help out Saw's partisans. And so the book is constantly cycling through those three POVs. Mon Mothma is in the Senate, and she is trying to get the Senate to vote to take away the Chancellor, or the Emperor's new powers. She's trying to limit his ability to govern by himself through the executive branch. She's trying to limit the power with the legislative branch. And so she is spending the whole book whipping up votes. Then you have Bail Organa, who is incredibly bitter about what happened to the Jedi. And so Bail Organa spends the book on a fact-finding mission. He is trying to find evidence that he can prove incontrovertibly that the Emperor lied about the Jedi, that the Emperor fabricated the Jedi plot to kill the Emperor. And so that is what his plot of the book is. And of course, the Empire does not want Bail Organa to do that. They can't outright kill him because he's a senator and he's got powerful friends, and it would be kind of a big problem. But the Emperor doesn't like that, and so the Empire starts going after him. Then you have Saw Gerrera and Sujin. Sujin is the POV character with Saw Gerrera's partisans. I don't think they're not called the partisans in this book, but it's his group. And Saw is beginning his plans for attacking various installations, for fighting against the Empire, stuff like that. And Sujin has to grapple with his past. Sujin has to work with Saw, who's a very eccentric personality. Sujin has special plans personally. And then Sujin gets caught up with Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and their whole stuff. And so the book is constantly flipping back and forth between the main three plot lines. In fact, it was so regular that you would know, oh, I just read this chapter, therefore Mon Mothma's coming up next. Oh, I just read this chapter, therefore Bail Organa has to be the next one. It just cycled through them. The Brandon Sanderson novel Elantris and his novel Warbreaker both did this very well, and this book does it pretty well too. There are some minor POVs, so a few POVs that are only for like 1 or 2 chapters, and then some that are like, through several chapters, but they're not quite main characters. This is like a very solid B plot, and I'm particularly referring to the character of Chemish. I did not care for the character of Chemish at all, didn't want Chemish's inclusion. This whole story with Chemish was just kind of like, this isn't really necessary. There's another character in the book named Haki, who I thought was getting a lot of the story that Chemish was trying to provide. I will say, because it's more spy related, which I think was because they wanted to make this tie into Andor, the show. And the So Chemish I would have just cut out of the book. But I have a feeling that Chemish is going to be a major character in books 2 and or 3. There are 2 books 2 and or 3, and so Chemish is being prepared for that. Haki, however, made total sense, her inclusion in this book, and I really liked the character of Haki. She was very interesting, and it was one of those things where I know things about her that Bale doesn't, and I'm like, oh, Bale, please, can I tell you things about Haki? And so that was a really, and that's also kind of a spy thing that's going on. There were very much intentional ways to make this book thematically and tonally similar to Andor. And as I said, if you had created this and put Journey to Andor like they had done Journey to the Force Awakens, it would have fit perfectly. In fact, it would have fit better than like the Journey to the Force Awakens books, which didn't really tie in at all, or Journey to the Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. I would argue that they didn't do that because the books 2 and 3 will come out after Andor, so they don't really want to wear out their welcome with that marketing, and also they didn't want to put that on there if they can save space for stuff. So I get why they didn't, but it could have done that, and they definitely marketed this book as such, as a tie-in to the Andor TV show. But it works very well with that tie-in. Again, I loved the Mon Mothma storyline. I loved the Bail Organa storyline. Sujin was a good storyline. I didn't love his storyline, but it was good, especially at the end. I will say the Sujin storyline got the best at the end. And the book is, even though the book has 4 technical parts, the 4th part is more of a denouement. So I'm going to say the book has 3 major portions. The first 150 pages, the middle 150 pages, and the last 150 pages. And I will say the first 150 pages, spectacular. Spectacular writing. The last 150 pages, oh my word, I'm surprised they let Alexander Freed get away with this. Spectacular. The middle 150 pages, I felt were kind of weak. Not great. It had some good moments, but as a whole, the middle portion was kind of weak. But it's okay. I'm forgiving with that because you want to start your book well and end your book well. I mean, it'd be amazing if the book's amazing the whole way through. But really, from a writing perspective, you want the opening of the book to be solid and you want the end of the book to be solid. And that is absolutely the case with this book. The ending, the whole climax, the way that all of the plot lines come together is genius and had me on the edge of my seat. And I knew this character lives, this character has to die, this character has to have this happen to them. I knew what was happening with the characters because I know the Star Wars universe, and I was still on the edge of my seat. I didn't know what Alexander Freed was going to do because he had me hooked. He had me invested, and he did a superb job. I love the characters of Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and he made me love them even more. He made me really connect with them, and I was just like, please let them figure it out. And actually, even though in the Clone Wars TV show, they're often shown in the same room, they're often shown, working towards the same cause, in this book, they actually are not working together because they have very different priorities. Mon Mothma's priority is about curtailing the Emperor's power. And so she's focused on that, using the Senate. Bail Organa just wants to expose the Emperor's evils, and Mon Mothma feels that if she were to expose the Emperor's evils, she would not be able to effectively curb his powers. She might present to people what he's doing is evil, but it wouldn't do anything. And so she is very practical, whereas Bail is very idealistic. And so Mon Mothma is kind of arguing against what Bail wants to do. She believes that the Jedi were probably good, but she doesn't believe that solving that issue is right for now. And there's some great themes about compromise, about choosing when is the right time to focus on your ideology and when is the best time to compromise so that you can have effective governance. And that's something that we're dealing with today in government, in the American government, is deciding when is the best time to take a stand and when is the best time to compromise and to be effective in your governing. And also there's a discussion about working with people that you don't actually agree with. Sometimes you have to, in order to get enough votes, you have to court people, not like the marital way, but court people who you kind of disagree with, but might agree with you on this particular issue. There's stuff about the separatists that Mon Mothma totally disagrees with, yet she has to work with them. There's people from the different sides of the aisle, political aisle. And of course, he doesn't enumerate like a Republican Party and Democratic Party, which I think was smart of him. I think it's smart that he doesn't really approach the party ideas. He rather approaches coalition ideas, which I think was smart because it keeps it from being too on the nose. I would say another canon political novel was Leia, Princess of Alderaan, but that book was so clever. Even though it had political parties, it was a clever way because you had the centrists and the populists, and actually you could make an argument that either side represents either side of American politics. So that was a very clever move on Claudia Gray's part. And I thought that, again, Alexander Freed was also clever, not doing political parties, just focusing on ideologies and focusing on like factions and stuff like that, which I think was very, very good. The book also has some interesting themes about post-war worlds and how do we treat people that you're kind of bringing back into the fold after a civil war. After the separatists and the Clone Wars left, now they're coming back. How do you reintegrate them properly? There's also discussions about how does the executive branch operate compared to the judiciary? How does that operate compared to the legislative branch? And again, that is very much a apt idea, not just for today's America, but for politics in general. This Montesquieuian idea of legislative versus a balance of power, legislature, executive, judicial. I love that whole Montesquieuian kind of discussion. And while it's not explicitly stated like that, if you're reading the book and understanding what Alexander Freed is talking about, it's great. I mentioned at the end of the book actually contextualizes some ways we think about Star Wars. So the end of this book is very climactic. A lot of things are happening, and it really has you on the edge of your seat. But what it also does is it makes you understand why events unfold the way they do. Because as you start reading the book, you're like, why doesn't this happen in the Star Wars universe? With the rise of the Empire? Why doesn't this group rise up? Why don't the Senate stop Palpatine in this way? Why don't these things happen? And then, very cleverly, he shows us why. This book is almost entirely set in like the first 2 months after Revenge of the Sith. It's very much right after the events of Revenge of the Sith. Maybe 3 or 4 months, but it's right after. And you really understand why the Empire was able to rise. In fact, they could have titled this series The Rise of the Empire, because this book in particular is just about the start of the Empire. And you really understand why it took hold the way that it did. And I think that was a very smart move on Alexander Freed's part. And to be honest, I'm surprised that they let him do it. I would have thought that's something that they would want to save for a TV show or a movie, but they actually let Alexander Freed do it, and I'm very impressed with what he did. This is his 6th Star Wars novel. It's his 5th Star Wars novel, 6th Star Wars book. He wrote the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, the Twilight Company novel for Battlefront, and then he wrote the Rogue One novelization. And I would say that at the time on my Goodreads, I reviewed the Alphabet Squadron really highly, and I wish I hadn't. I was too nice to him. And Lionsight did not like the books at all, and so I didn't care for those books. Twilight Company is a book I've read twice, totally forgot about it within months after reading it. It's not a memorable book, not a memorable writing style. Rogue One was an amazing novelization, but part of it that was because Alexander Freed did some really clever ideas with the way he told the story, with the data files, and what he chose to focus on in here instead of here, and the way he brought in references and stuff was great. But at the same time, the story itself wasn't his story. It was, the people who wrote Rogue One. So I don't really hold that in the same vein of his writing ability. So in terms of his original Star Wars novels, which I think is the only novels he's written, in terms of his original Star Wars novels, this is by far far his best work, and I really liked it. It's still not necessarily in my top 5, or even, it may not even be in my top 10 Star Wars novels. I think it'll make my top 15. I think it'll make, for the canon, that is. The canon this is the 51st canon novel. I think I would put it as the top 15. It's a very good book. I will give it a 9 out of 10. Again, I didn't care for the Chemish plotline, which is a B plotline. It's very minor, but it's not one of the 3A plotlines, but still it's something there I didn't care for. And then the middle of the book wasn't perfectly handled pacing wise. I think it was a little overlong. It's a long, beefy book. It's a long, it's 460 pages, but it's bang for your buck with story, and I really enjoyed it. And I would have finished it so much faster if I had not had a terrible week at work last week. So that is my review of Reign of the Empire: The Mask of Fear. Let me know your thoughts on the book down in the comments section down below. If you've read the book, let me know what you think of it. If you're excited for it, if you have other recommendations of similar books for people, talk about what other Star Wars books you're excited for this year. Let me know all those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.